Spent 25 years on the street, dealt with a large number of violent homicides, part one crimes, rapes, robberies, that such, that really taxed on my mind as a young 27-year-old police officer. But from the very onset, I worked in a very, very violent part of the city right out of the academy. And so I saw first and foremost the violence that men and women can throw against one another. In '97, I was involved in a motorcycle wreck that nearly cost me my life. Had a severe brain bleed from where I impacted the pavement. I had to relearn how to walk and talk and add. I could do everything in my head, but to get everything to come from my head or my heart to public speaking or meeting with people was very, very hard. It took about almost 6 months before I went back to work part-time. And emotionally, I think that was the hardest. The physical stuff was hard and difficult to understand and deal with, but not as hard as the mental anguish. But had it not been for my church that I attend and my family, I know it would have been much worse. Back in 2013, I was hit with about 7,900 volts as I stepped into a static electrical or a circle, if you will, of static electricity from a down power line. And it went in my left shoulder, up on the deltoid here, about 21 places, and came out my left calf. And, we officers across the nation, we've all been tased. We know what that 5-second ride is like. I counted to 28, and I kept looking into the sky thinking, okay, this is it. I'm going home. I was prepared. Been a Christian all my life. I've slipped, I fell, like many of us have. But at that point, I had gotten back where I needed to be with God. And so I wasn't worried about what might happen. I knew where I was going. But I never lost consciousness. I contacted my wife, told her what had happened. She met me at the burn unit at KU Med and spent the night in the burn unit and got out the next day with really no injuries to speak of. And then wound up in going to Costco. I had come home from my folks, visiting them and over the Thanksgiving holidays, and went with a friend of mine to Costco to do some shopping. And I almost didn't take my sidearm, but I thought, you know what? I promised my wife I never would leave the house and go out in public, as many officers often do, unarmed. So it's always best to be prepared to defend yourself or your family. In this case, my family was not with me. I went with a friend from the neighborhood. We walked into the store. It was packed. It was, that mad shopping season, that mad shopping week right after Thanksgiving. And we went in there, loaded up the items that we went to go buy. And as we started to push toward the registers, a large crowd of people came rushing by me, screaming and hollering. And I was thinking, what in the world's going on? I had not seen any threat that I could see. I grabbed a young man, pulled him into the aisle where I was, and asked him what was going on. Told him I was a police officer. He said there was a man out front shooting. He was shooting people. I had not heard any gunshots, but I nevertheless identified myself to the manager after telling my friend to to vacate the building, to call 911 and let them know that I was inside and I was taking care of the problem. This manager leaned forward and yelled at me and told me what the guy was at, where the guy was at, what he was wearing, what he had said, which was basically he was an off-duty U.S. Marshal there, and he was there to kill people. I quickly identified the suspect and began to maneuver my way through the store to get to a position of advantage behind him as he continued to chase people. He had not yet fired the gun, but I was primed and ready in case something like that happened. He made his way toward the back of the store. At that point, I cornered him, identified myself as a police officer, told him to drop the weapon, and, dropped to the ground. And instead, he turned and pointed the pistol at me as if he was going to fire it. I engaged him and ended the threat. But the whole time throughout this, I was at peace. There was no fear. I knew that if it came to me losing my life or me getting seriously injured, that was my role that was my job. I was a police officer, on duty or off duty. "20 days before that, I was engaged in my first on-duty officer-involved shooting with several suspects that were wanted for homicide in our city. So I was kind of, even as, we all go through the training, we understand what's expected of us because we see it written in black and white in our SOP or in our general orders. But I had, 25, almost 24 years, I had not been involved with one yet, personally. So having gone through this shooting on duty in my city kind of prepared me for what to expect from the shooting in this other county. But again, having that faith in God and knowing that I was in accordance with the Bible, with my actions that day, either day, and when I was involved in these shootings, was very, very reassuring. In today's climate, my message to the officers that are working the streets now, having since retired a year ago, is don't try and take something like this on your own. You need a strong faith. You need a strong church. You need a strong family at home to help you weather this. It's not wrong to feel guilty for taking a life or feel bad, if you will. We're not intended to end another person's life, but God has placed police officers on this earth as peacekeepers. If you're an officer and you have been involved in a lethal force situation, whether it's gun, knife, vehicle, what have you, if you've been forced to defend yourself using lethal force at work, you need to make sure you have a plan well in advance, that you've thought about what happens, what's next. But the bottom line is, at the end of the day, Scripture's where you need to be. Base your life in the Bible, because that's the only thing that's going to bring true peace. Thanks.